Larissa had never envisioned herself bound in matrimony to Sheldon, a man she regarded merely as the quintessential nerd clad in spectacles. Yet, life's unpredictable whims had other plans, and there she stood, passport in hand, her identity newly rewritten with his surname. It was a twist of fate laced with irony. "It's a relief he didn't insist on a wedding," Larissa confided to her best friend Valerie, her voice a mixture of relief and incredulity. "Imagine the jokes, me, tied to a dud." Valerie, ever the optimist, countered, "He's not half bad, success-wise. Anyway, how's your mom?" Bright side, "She's better, moving to a regular ward soon," Larissa responded, a spark of hope flickering in her tone. Dire circumstances had thrust Larissa into this unexpected domestic entanglement. Her mother, Nadine, faced a grim prognosis without a prompt and complex surgery, unattainable in their small town of Southvale or even the broader regional healthcare landscape. Desperate, Larissa sent appeals across the nation, seeking a miracle. That miracle appeared, cloaked in a past long forgotten. Sheldon, once just a schoolmate, now a prominent neurosurgeon in New York, offered a lifeline. "I need your help, Sheldon. I can't repay you, but I won't forget this," Larissa pleaded over the phone, her voice thick with desperation. Days later, as mother and daughter navigated the sprawling medical complex in New York, Sheldon extended an unusual proposition. "I can perform the surgery under a charity quota. On one condition," he began, pausing for effect, "you must marry me." Stunned, Larissa managed only a disbelieving "what?" "But I have someone in Southvale. Think it over." "You have till morning," Sheldon replied, his face unreadable. The night stretched long and sleepless for Larissa, her thoughts a turbulent sea. She dared not burden her already troubled mother with her quandary. Nadine, for her part, remained blissfully unaware, praising Sheldon's kindness and generosity. By dawn, resignation set in. "I accept," Larissa told Sheldon, her smile wan, clinging to hope it was all some cruel jest. "No ceremony then. Tonight you share my home as my wife," Sheldon declared, finality in his tone. Larissa's new reality was complex and suffocating. While Sheldon was no tyrant, his presence was an ever-present reminder of her sacrifice. She resolved to endure only until her mother's recovery, then flee this unwelcome bond. "Tomorrow we visit my father. He's eager to meet you," Sheldon announced one evening, oblivious to Larissa's internal struggle. The visit revealed unexpected truths. Sheldon was not the biological son of the fit and charming Victor, who greeted Larissa with a warmth that stirred something within her. In the days that followed, as Victor showed Larissa around New York, an illicit attraction blossomed between them, each stolen glance and shared laugh a step down a forbidden path. "I can't do this anymore," Victor eventually confessed, his voice heavy. "You're wonderful, but you're Sheldon's wife. This is wrong." Overwhelmed, Larissa confessed everything about the sham marriage and the medical blackmail. Victor's outrage was palpable, his promise of confrontation immediate. The days passed in a haze of feigned normalcy, with Larissa and Sheldon maintaining a fragile facade. Each interaction was a carefully measured dance, a performance for the benefit of Nadine and the outside world. Yet, beneath the surface, tension simmered. Larissa's mind was a whirlwind, torn between her duty to her mother and the burgeoning, forbidden feelings for Victor. Every shared glance, every accidental touch, was laden with unspoken emotions. Then, without warning, the precarious balance shattered. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across their living room, Sheldon dropped a bombshell. "We need to talk," he said, his voice devoid of its usual clinical detachment. Larissa's heart skipped a beat, her mind racing through a myriad of possibilities. "I've met someone else," Sheldon announced, his tone almost nonchalant, as if discussing the weather. "I think we should end this arrangement." Larissa blinked, momentarily stunned. Of all the outcomes she had anticipated, this was not one of them. "What?" she managed to utter, her voice barely a whisper. The words seemed to hang in the air, suspended in the charged silence of the room. It's simple, Sheldon continued, his gaze unwavering. I want a divorce. Nadine is being discharged tomorrow, so you and she will need to find other accommodations by evening. For a moment, Larissa could only stare at him, her mind struggling to process the rapid turn of events. Then, slowly, the implication sank in. Relief washed over her, mingled with a strange sense of disbelief. I agree, she stammered, the reality of her freedom starting to dawn. The next day was a whirlwind of activity. Nadine, oblivious to the undercurrents of tension, chattered excitedly about her recovery and the prospect of returning home. Larissa, meanwhile, packed their belongings with a mix of relief and trepidation. She couldn't bring herself to explain the sudden upheaval to her mother, not yet. The journey back to South Vale was filled with Nadine's cheerful recounting of her hospital stay, a stark contrast to Larissa's introspective silence. Back in South Vale, life slowly resumed its familiar rhythm, though Larissa felt like she was moving through a dream. The events of the past 2 months seemed surreal, like fragments of a vivid nightmare. She decided to keep the details of her ordeal to herself, sparing her mother the unsettling truth. Weeks passed, and just as Larissa began to believe she could put the whole episode behind her, a knock at the door shattered her fragile peace. Opening it, she found herself face to face with Victor. His presence was like a balm, soothing her frayed nerves. I've thought it over, Larissa, he began, his voice steady, yet tinged with urgency. I can't be without you. Will you marry me for real this time? Tears welled up in Larissa's eyes, a mix of joy and relief. Yes, she whispered, glancing back at her mother, who stood in the doorway, bewildered but hopeful. I won't even need to change my passport. Victor's proposal was the promise of a new beginning, a life built on genuine affection rather than coercion. As they embraced, Larissa felt the weight of the past months lift, replaced by a burgeoning hope for the future. So ended the story of a girl named Larissa. What do you think of this story? Let's chat in the comments. Now we are moving on to the next story, but for now I want to ask you to subscribe to my channel. There are many more very interesting stories to come. And thank you for the like, it helps me promote my channel. Sit back and let's listen to the next story. Allison despised being commanded, yet articulating this simple sentiment to those around her was perpetually elusive. Just as she had nestled into her favorite armchair and immersed herself in the digital world, her husband, interrupting her brief reprieve, made a request. Ally, the button on my backup lab coat is broken. Could you find a replacement? And please iron the coat. I've been nearly crawling on my belly all day at the lab, and my primary one is due for a wash. Why should Allison be the one to know where to find a button? Why iron a coat that was destined to be dirted again? Find it yourself. I don't keep track of your buttons. And you can iron your own coat if it's so necessary, Allison snapped back. But her husband, Gene, pressed on. Can you tell me what you're so busy with that you can't manage these simple tasks? I'm not asking you to make me another coat. Do I even look like a married man, or more like a bachelor orphan without a mother? This remark stung Allison. If anything inflamed her more than unsolicited demands, it was the insinuation that she wasn't doing enough as a wife. Just to clarify, you're indeed married. Not some lord with servants. Who do you think I am? Your housekeeper. You managed just fine before we married, and now suddenly I'm a free maid? I came home from work just as tired as you and equally deserving of some downtime. Allison, you sit in an insurance office, shuffling papers, managing a mere 5 files a day from the comfort of your chair. Granted, it's a job, and someone's got to do it. But I work at a plant, hustling all day, fixing machines, teaching apprentices. It's physically demanding. I make 4 times what you do. And then I'm supposed to come home to do laundry, ironing, and dishes while you continue to sit around. Gene's tirade continued about a wife's duties, proudly citing his income as justification for his expectations, prompting Allison to question his understanding of a husband's responsibilities. You're the man, aren't you? Shouldn't you be supporting me rather than dictating chores? I do support you, Your entire paycheck goes to your manicures, eyebrow care, and peels, and you spend half of mine on the same. What do I gain from all this? And yet they call women materialistic. Allison scoffed, turning her attention back to her phone, convinced he would simmer down and handle things himself. But Jean's frustration was far from superficial. If you're so tired of my desires and complaints, perhaps returning to your mother's house might give you some perspective? Honestly, I'm baffled as to why I even married you in the first place. This altercation exhausted Allison. Was it too much to ask for some peace after a long day? Fueled by his suggestion, the idea of leaving for a few weeks suddenly seemed appealing. Let him endure his solitude and recognize the value of a vibrant young wife. In her school days, Allison was neither an exemplary student nor a poor one. Her entire class was uniformly average, without any future scholars among them. Jean, however, was the exception, brilliant in mathematics, computer science, and physics, though he opted for a technical school over a university, training as a CNC machine setter, a prestigious and well-compensated position in their town. Allison pursued administrative studies and settled into a comfortable yet unremarkable job at an insurance company. It paid modestly but demanded little, allowing her ample time to scroll through social media and wait for clients seeking insurance coverage. Why did Allison marry Jean? Largely to escape her mother's incessant nagging about chores and idleness. Jean had his own apartment, a legacy from his late grandmother, and a decent income to boot. Why did Jean marry Allison? Likely because she was the most attractive girl in their class, a fact reconfirmed at a class reunion that rekindled their acquaintance. Tired of enduring her husband's incessant complaints, Allison resolved that it was time to teach him a lesson. Her mother would undoubtedly grumble about her potentially ruining her marriage, but such complaints were nothing new. Besides, it wouldn't be long Jean would surely miss her soon enough. The following morning, Allison took a personal day off work, packed her belongings, and left her husband's apartment. After a taxing double shift, Shira Walters adjusted the heavy shopping bag on her shoulder. Her errands included picking up groceries and fetching her twin boys from daycare, where she learned they needed yet another craft made from natural materials. She decided one would suffice for both. Vanya's overalls were filthy from his adventures on the playground, and Dimka had lost another button from his jacket. Their buttons would always be mismatched, it seemed. Shura's life was a balancing act. Raising twins alone was no small feat. She worked night shifts at a food processing plant, packing jellied meats into containers, then raced home to take the boys to daycare, caught a few hours of sleep, and rushed to clean offices part-time nearby. Her main job worked on a 2-day on, 2-day off schedule, which was the only reason she managed any sleep at all. Occasionally, she relied on her elderly neighbor, Zoya, to watch the boys when she was on shift. With minimal chores at home, if one didn't count the children's craft project, her evening looked manageable. Cook some borscht, wash Vanya's pants, and clean the shared areas of her apartment block. Tonight, she had the night off, a rare luxury. Shura, a vaguely familiar voice called out, part greeting, part surprise. She turned and recognized Jean, her ex-classmate, also burdened with shopping bags. Jean? What are you doing here? Just some shopping. Wow, you're loaded down. Need help? You seem just as burdened. But yes, if you don't mind, it's just half a block, though I also have to manage these 2 young rascals. Jean took her bag and they walked together. Isn't your husband going to be upset about this? He won't, since he left for another dimension 2 years ago. And isn't your wife going to tear out my last hair? Wait, didn't you marry Allison? Jean smirked, a trace of regret flickering across his face. I did, indeed. But life has its twists, and it seems we both ended up in another dimension. The revised story strives to incorporate American names, maintain high perplexity and burstiness through varied sentence structure and complexity, and is divided into clear sections for better readability and engagement. Actually, she left just recently, Jean admitted, a hint of sorrow mingling with a bemused smile. So, your wife won't be yanking any hair today. Shura chuckled, the burden of her bags momentarily forgotten as they approached the entrance of her building. "What about you? I heard you were doing pretty well until I wasn't," Jean cut in, his voice tinged with a mix of humor and resignation. "Marriage, it turns out, is more complicated than following a blueprint or fixing a machine." The remark struck a chord with Shura, who had navigated the tumultuous waters of single parenthood since her husband's departure. "Tell me about it. Life throws you curveballs, and you either catch them or dodge." Jean nodded, his gaze lingering on the lively twins tugging at Shura's other hand. "Looks like you've got your hands full but managing well." "Well, you learn to juggle, or you drop everything," Shura replied, her tone light yet sincere. They reached her door, and she balanced the bag on one knee to fish out her keys. "Thank you for the help, Jean. It's funny how paths cross sometimes." "Indeed," Jean agreed, handing over the bag. "And thank you for the chat. It's nice to see a familiar face doing well. Gives hope, you know." Shura smiled, her eyes crinkling with genuine warmth. "Anytime, Jean. Take care of yourself." As Jean walked away, Shura's thoughts drifted to Allison. She wondered how her former classmate was handling her newfound independence. Was she finding solace or solitude? Shura shook her head. Some stories were left to unfold without an audience. Allison sat alone in the small, dimly lit apartment that once buzzed with the energy of a shared life. The walls, once adorned with pictures of laughter and love, now stared back at her blankly. She mulled over the rapid unraveling of her marriage, each thought punctuated by the ticking of the clock, an audible reminder of the time slipping away. Her phone buzzed, a message from a friend asking how she was holding up. Hanging in there, she typed back, her fingers hesitating before adding, "Just taking it one day at a time." She stared at the message, her heart aching with a mix of defiance and despair. Was she really managing, or merely masquerading? Allison recalled the day she left. The argument had been like any other, yet something had snapped within her, a realization that she could no longer thrive in the shadow of unmet expectations and unappreciated sacrifices. She had sought freedom, but found herself grappling with isolation instead. Outside, the city hummed with the promise of early spring, but the chill in her apartment was a stark contrast to the budding warmth. Allison wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, her mind wandering to Jean. Had he found peace in their separation, or did he harbor regrets as she did? The days turned into weeks, and communication between them had dwindled to nothing more than necessary exchanges about divorce proceedings and division of assets. It was clinical, devoid of the passion that had once defined their relationship. With each signed paper, a chapter closed, leaving behind a trail of what-ifs and might-have-beens. One evening, as Allison sifted through old photographs, she stumbled upon a picture of Shura from their school days. The memory of Shura's resilience and unpretentious happiness sparked a thought in Allison. Maybe there was more to life than clinging to past grievances and faded dreams. Perhaps it was time to rediscover herself beyond the roles she had played: a wife, a burden bearer, a silent sufferer. With a newfound resolve, Allison picked up her phone and dialed Shura. The call went to voicemail, but she left a message. "Hey Shura, it's Allison. It's been ages, but I was thinking about you. Let's catch up soon. Hope you and the boys are doing well." Hanging up, Allison felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in months. It was a small step, perhaps, but a step forward nonetheless. As she looked around her sparse apartment, she envisioned not a space of confinement, but a canvas of possibilities. It was time to rebuild, not just the walls around her, but the life she truly desired, one day, one decision at a time. The spring brought more than just a change in weather, it heralded a shift in Allison's perspective. With each passing day, the weight of her past decisions seemed to lighten, and the contours of a new path gradually took shape. As days lengthened into evenings bathed in the golden hue of the setting sun, Allison found herself spending more time outside, walking through the bustling city parks and along the quiet riverside. Each step seemed to reaffirm her choice to seek a future defined by her desires rather than dictated by duty or despair. One particularly serene evening, as Allison sat on a park bench watching families and couples enjoying the warm breeze, her phone buzzed. It was Shura returning her call. "Allison, it was so good to hear from you. I've been thinking about you too." Shura's voice was full of warmth and surprise. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about everything," Allison confessed, her voice softer than she intended. "And I realized, maybe it's time to start fresh, really start fresh." "That sounds like a brilliant idea," Shura encouraged. "Life's too short to spend it mired in regrets." They talked for hours as if no time had passed between them. Shura shared stories of her twins' latest antics and her new life with Jean. The simplicity and contentment in her voice were unmistakable and infectious. "Shura, how do you do it? How do you find happiness in the simplicity?" Allison asked, genuinely curious. "It's not about finding happiness in simplicity, but finding peace with what you have," Shura explained. "Once you stop chasing what you think you need, you might realize what you already have is enough." These words struck a chord with Allison. As the call ended, she felt a surge of motivation. It wasn't about transforming her life overnight or making grand gestures. It was about appreciating the small moments, the everyday interactions that weave the fabric of contentment. Inspired by her conversations with Shura, Allison began to invest more time in activities that brought her joy. She joined a local photography club, reconnecting with an old passion she had neglected. Each snapshot she took captured more than just images. They were reflections of her journey towards self-discovery and acceptance. She also started volunteering at a community center, teaching basic insurance and financial planning to young adults. Sharing her knowledge, helping others find their footing, brought a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. As summer approached, Allison planned a small gathering at her apartment, a housewarming of sorts, celebrating not a new home but a renewed spirit. She invited a few old friends, including Shura and Jean, eager to reintroduce them to the person she was becoming. The evening of the gathering, her apartment was filled with laughter, music, and stories. Shura and Jean arrived with the twins, who immediately livened up the space with their cheerful chaos. "You've done a wonderful job with the place," Jean commented, looking around at the modest but tastefully decorated apartment. "Thanks, Jean. It feels good, starting over," Allison replied, her smile genuine and bright. As the night drew on, conversations ebbed and flowed, and Allison realized that while the road to recovery and rediscovery was often long and winding, it was also filled with unexpected friendships and simple joys. Standing by her living room window, watching her guests chat animatedly, Allison felt a profound sense of peace. She understood now that her journey wasn't just about moving away from her past, but moving towards a future where she was the author of her own story, one beautiful, ordinary moment at a time. In that room, filled with the people who mattered, under the soft glow of string lights, Allison knew she had found her way back not just to happiness, but to herself. And that realization was more liberating and fulfilling than she had ever imagined. This is where the second story ends and the third story begins. Allison and Jean faced an unusual situation, but the characters in the next story plunge into an even more difficult situation. Beverly's presence is an anomaly. She weighs merely 105 pounds, yet her movements resonate through the thin walls like a mammoth in turmoil. She stomps and curses with such vigor that one might imagine a hippopotamus rather than a petite woman on the other side. Compact yet wiry, Beverly is full of life and vigor. Her eyes, small and piercing, sparkle with a mischievous glint, often reflecting her fiery temperament. Her forehead is narrow, sometimes creased with what appears to be the weight of contemplation, though it's hard to imagine profound thoughts swirling through her mind, perhaps just a couple of simple ideas tangled up in there. Each morning, she scurries to work, leaving her lover, Steve, to bask a little longer in the remnants of their shared warmth. Every morning, at the stroke of 9, the predictable yet startling thud of a body hitting the floor reverberates through the thin walls separating our apartments. This sound, sharp, sudden, and somehow both mundane and dramatic, marks the transition from night to day for Steve. This daily disruption isn't merely a sound, it's a proclamation of his reluctant return to consciousness after another night lost in the nebulous realms of dreams and drink. Steve's mornings begin not with the gentle chirping of birds or the soft rays of dawn filtering through gauzy curtains, but with the harsh reality of the floor meeting his cheek. The impact, dry and unyielding, serves as his crude alarm clock. His body, sprawled awkwardly on the hardwood, is a testament to the previous night's excesses, a mixture of inertia and inebriation. As he lies there, half-conscious heap of limbs, his hangover is a silent, throbbing presence, an unwelcome companion whispering reminders of last night's revelry. In these moments, Beverly's role shifts from lover to caretaker. With a routine that's as tender as it is resigned, she navigates around his prone form, her movements a ballet of efficiency and slight irritation. She prepares for the day, her actions punctuated by the soft sounds of her morning routine, the whisper of her robe against her skin, the clink of a spoon against a bowl, the hushed gurgle of coffee brewing. These sounds, so ordinary yet intimate, create a counterpoint to the earlier disturbance. Yet, in this daily tableau, there is an undercurrent of dependency and indulgence. Steve, ever the child in a man's body, relies on Beverly's affection and her seemingly inexhaustible patience. He drinks deeply from the well of her goodwill, each gulp a mix of need and entitlement. He sprawls on the floor, his body contorted in a parody of repose, his face pressed against the cool floorboards, the discomfort at odds with his peaceful slumber just moments before. Beverly, meanwhile, administers her love with a pragmatism that is both heartbreaking and heartwarming. She loves not just the man Steve could be, but the man he is flawed, dependent, and all too human. Her love is an active, palpable force. It's in every cup of coffee she sets beside him as he groggily acknowledges the new day, in every quiet admonition as she nudges him toward the shower, in the resigned smile that crosses her face as she watches him finally stand, shaky and bleary-eyed. Beverly, with her enigmatic charm and tumultuous love life, could very well be the protagonist of a noir novel set in the pulsating heart of the city. Her allure, as complex as it is compelling, has painted her life's canvas with strokes broad and nuanced, the colors of her experiences vibrant against the backdrop of mundane, everyday existence. Born in the verdant embrace of a rural village, her youth was cradled by pastoral beauty and the simplicity of country living. It was here, among the whispering winds and the timeless dance of the river, that she first learned about love and loss. Her first husband, a solid and sober man, had gifted her not only his heart, but also a robust home, its foundations as sturdy as his affections. His untimely demise left her not just in mourning, but in possession of their cherished riverside abode, which she, driven by a restlessness she couldn't quell, eventually sold. The decision to move to the city marked the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with the promise of adventure and the allure of the unknown. In the bustling metropolis, Beverly traded the spaciousness of her 5-room house for a cramped 2-room apartment, a stark testament to the sacrifices we make in pursuit of change. Her domicile, although modest, was a far cry from the rustic expanse of her previous home, each corner a reminder of what she had left behind. Yet, it was in this constrained space that Beverly's identity as a femme fatale began to crystallize. With the dust of her rural past settling behind her, she embraced the city's rhythm, its unyielding pace sculpting her into a figure both admired and admonished. Her subsequent relationships, marked by their intensity and brevity, seemed to mirror the fleeting nature of city life, each lover a chapter, each heartbreak a comma in the long, complex sentence of her life. Her second significant relationship, formed in the shadow of her first husband's memory, was with a man named Nick, a stark contrast to her first love. Nick, with his cunning charm and a predilection for idleness, brought excitement and exasperation in equal measure. His parasitic lifestyle, feeding off Beverly's generosity without remorse, painted their days together in strokes of discord and disillusionment. He was a gamble that promised high returns, but delivered only loss, emotionally and materially. As Beverly navigated through these tumultuous waters, her resilience became as notable as her misfortunes. Each romantic endeavor, no matter how ill-fated, seemed to fortify her resolve rather than diminish it. She emerged from each relationship not weaker but wiser, her spirit undampened by the trials she faced. Her allure, tinged with the wisdom of hard-earned experiences, drew admirers and critics alike, her life a vivid portrayal of the eternal struggle between heart and circumstance. As Beverly stepped over the threshold of her new urban dwelling, the stark contrast between her former expansive home and this cramped two-room apartment was not merely a change of scenery, it was a transformation of life's stage. Here, in a mere 30 square meters, the walls seemed to lean inward, creating an intimate yet suffocating space that both contained and defined her new existence. In the diminutive living room, the couch, her sole concession to comfort, barely squeezed in, its arms brushing against the cold, impersonal walls. The fabric, chosen for durability rather than aesthetics, bore the indifferent touch of countless previous tenants, a silent testament to the transient nature of urban living. Across this compact living area, a narrow door opened into an even smaller bedroom where a single bed claimed the majority of the floor space, leaving scant room for anything else. Each morning, as Beverly maneuvered around the bed to dress, the limitations of her space became a tangible reminder of the constraints she now faced. This apartment, though lacking in spatial generosity, was Beverly's attempt at planting roots in the volatile soil of the city. The urban environment, teeming with life and relentless in its pace, offered her both anonymity and opportunity. However, the very act of living here was a daily negotiation between her desires for a better life and the realities of her means. The walls, once envisioned as blank canvases awaiting her personal touch, quickly turned into barriers that segmented her life into compartments as compact as her living quarters. Despite these confines, Beverly infused her new home with touches of her personality. The decor, a mix of thrift store finds and a few cherished relics from her past home, created a patchwork of styles that reflected her eclectic tastes. A small, potted plant perched precariously on the windowsill, straining towards the sliver of sunlight that managed to penetrate the urban gloom. This plant, like Beverly, struggled to thrive in an environment that was not quite hostile, yet hardly nurturing. Her kitchen, a narrow alley of culinary potential, was less a room than a culinary afterthought, equipped with just enough appliances to function. Here, Beverly brewed strong coffee each morning, the rich aroma briefly masking the less savory scents of the city that occasionally wafted through her open window. The kitchen, often cluttered with the detritus of quick, solitary meals, was less a place of nourishment than a testament to her self-sufficiency. In these constrained conditions, Beverly's life in the city became a daily exercise in adaptation. She learned to navigate her small space with a dancer's grace, each movement calculated to avoid collision with furniture or walls. Her social life, too, adapted to her limited physical space. Gatherings were intimate affairs, the close quarters ensuring that conversations were both physically and emotionally proximate. The juxtaposition of her expansive rural past with her constricted urban present created a dynamic tension in her life. Beverly found herself constantly balancing the freedom of her memories with the restrictions of her current reality. This balancing act, performed within the confines of her diminished domain, was not just a struggle for physical space, but a battle for emotional and psychological freedom. In the confined space of Beverly's modest apartment, her relationship with Nick unfolded like a storm brewing on the horizon, visible, inevitable, and fraught with the potential for destruction. Nick, with his easy charm and a smile that hinted at mischief more often than honesty, brought with him a whirlwind of emotions and actions that shook the very foundations of Beverly's attempt at urban tranquility. Nick's presence in Beverly's life was paradoxical. He was both a breath of fresh air and a suffocating presence. His approach to life was characterized by a carefree attitude that bordered on recklessness, a stark contrast to Beverly's more calculated and mindful demeanor. He moved into her life and her apartment with the ease of a cat slinking into a warm, inviting lap, making himself comfortable in her space, her routine, and her finances with little regard for the chaos he trailed. Their mornings often started with sharp contrasts in their approaches to the day. Beverly, ever the early riser, would maneuver around the cramped space with purpose and precision, her movements refined and deliberate. Nick, on the other hand, embraced the mornings with a languid indifference, often sprawled across the bed well into the late hours of the morning, his nights spent indulging in pleasures that left him lethargic and unmotivated. The dynamics of their relationship were further complicated by Nick's aversion to stable employment. His days were spent in a series of unproductive endeavors, often involving questionable deals and shady acquaintances, leaving Beverly to shoulder the burden of their financial responsibilities. This imbalance in their partnership was a constant source of tension, with Beverly's frustration simmering just beneath the surface of her otherwise composed exterior. Nick's propensity for taking more than he gave extended beyond the financial. He had a talent for diminishing Beverly's carefully curated domestic space, cluttering her minimalist arrangements with remnants of his disordered life, empty bottles, discarded clothing, and other detritus of his careless existence. Each item, a small testament to his disregard for the sanctity of her space and their relationship. Their conflicts, when they erupted, were as intense as they were frequent. Voices raised in frustration, arguments that danced dangerously on the edge of civility, and reconciliations that were passionate but fleeting. These episodes would often culminate in scenes that blurred the lines between love and warfare, with Beverly and Nick alternately the aggressor and the aggrieved. Yet, amidst this turbulence, there was an undeniable bond that kept them tethered to each other. Perhaps it was the intensity of their disagreements that made their moments of harmony all the more sweet. In the eye of their stormy relationship, they found moments of peace, brief interludes where their differences seemed trivial compared to the strength of their attachment. These moments, precious and rare, were characterized by a deep, if not entirely rational, connection. Conversations that lasted through the night, the sharing of dreams too fragile to be exposed to the harsh light of day, and the mutual understanding of each other's flaws and fears. In these fleeting instances, Beverly and Nick found a sanctuary from the turmoil of their relationship, a reminder of why they had been drawn together in the first place. As turbulent as their relationship was, it was a vivid depiction of the complexities of love and dependency, showcasing both the destructive and redemptive powers of human connections. Beverly and Nick, in their dance of discord and desire, reflected the perennial human struggle to find balance between the need for another and the pursuit of personal fulfillment. The curtain closed on Beverly's tumultuous chapter with Nick not with a climactic resolution, but through a slow, draining diminishment of both resources and patience. His departure, marked by the silent disappearance of small yet significant items, last of the cucumbers, the stealthily withdrawn savings, even the innocuous shampoo, left more than just an empty apartment. It left a void filled with the echo of broken promises and the stark realization of betrayal. In the aftermath, Beverly's life resembled the scattered pieces of a puzzle, each fragment a mixed memory of joy and disappointment. Yet, unlike the despair that often follows such losses, Beverly embraced her situation with a resilience that was as formidable as it was unexpected. Her response to this latest betrayal was not to retreat but to rebuild, not just her home, but her self-esteem and her outlook on life. The decision to hire Ulam, an immigrant with his own dreams and challenges, was less about filling the emptiness left by Nick and more about reasserting her autonomy. Ulam brought with him not only his craftsmanship, but also a perspective that was refreshingly earnest and grounded. This new partnership, initially formed on mutual needs, her need for a renewed living space, and his for stability and legitimacy, gradually morphed into a symbiotic relationship that brought subtle changes to Beverly's life. Ulam's arrival brought with it the buzz of renovation. The sound of hammering, the scent of fresh paint, the sight of old being peeled away and new being embraced, these were signs of Beverly's apartment, and by extension her life, undergoing a transformation. Each stroke of the brush, each nail driven into the wall, symbolized a step away from her past dependencies and a move towards a future she was crafting with her own hands. The dynamic between Beverly and Ulam was markedly different from her previous entanglements. Here was a relationship based on respect and the shared labor of building something durable, both in terms of their immediate environment and their interpersonal connection. Yulim's presence in her life was like a steady hand on the tiller of a boat that had been buffeted by too many storms. His reliability and work ethic contrasted sharply with Nick's erratic and extractive tendencies, providing a stabilizing force that was new and deeply reassuring to Beverly. As the apartment slowly shed its dated facade and embraced a more modern aesthetic, so too did Beverly begin to shed the remnants of her past vulnerabilities. With each new fixture installed and each room revitalized, she felt a growing sense of empowerment, a stark contrast to the feelings of entrapment that had marked her relationships with Nick and others before him. This physical renovation paralleled an internal renewal, a psychological refurbishment that was perhaps more significant than the physical changes around her. However, this rebirth was not without its own set of challenges. The closer the apartment came to its new incarnation, the more Beverly had to confront the fact that change, even positive change, brings its own uncertainties. Would this new beginning truly insulate her from future heartaches, or was it just another setup for a potential fall? These questions lingered in the freshly painted corridors of her mind, a reminder that while one can renovate a space, renovating a life is a far more complex undertaking. Through this endless cycle of misfortune and rebirth, Beverly remained a study in resilience and transformation, her life a testament to the possibility of renewal in the face of despair. Her journey through these cycles of collapse and regeneration reflects not just personal fortitude, but also the universal human capacity for recovery and hope. As Beverly's apartment transformed under Yulim's skilled hands, so too did the invisible layers of their relationship, weaving together threads of practical need and emotional resonance. This unfolding dynamic was not just a meeting of minds, but of worlds, each bearing the distinct imprint of vastly different cultural soils, yet finding common ground in the shared space of renovation and renewal. Yulim brought with him the rich tapestry of his background, imbued with the traditions of his homeland in Uzbekistan. His approach to work was meticulous and proud, a reflection of a heritage that values craftsmanship and the integrity of one's labor. In contrast, Beverly, shaped by the pragmatic currents of urban American life, was both fascinated and occasionally bewildered by the careful rituals and deep-seated ethics that Yulim adhered to. This interplay between his steadfast traditionalism and her more fluid, eclectic lifestyle created a rich milieu for mutual learning and adaptation. Their collaboration in the apartment renovation became a daily dance of negotiation and compromise. Yulim introduced Beverly to the subtle art of choosing materials not only for their durability, but for the harmony they could bring to a home. He talked about the energy of colors and the importance of creating a living space that could breathe and give back warmth to its inhabitants. Beverly, in turn, brought her own sense of style and function, insisting on modern efficiencies that blended with aesthetic appeal. This exchange of ideas was not without its tensions. Debates over choices in kitchen tiles or bathroom fixtures often morphed into broader discussions about utility versus beauty, cost versus quality. As the walls of her apartment absorbed new hues and the floors were laid down anew, so too were the foundations of their burgeoning relationship being tested and strengthened. Beverly appreciated Yulim's reliability and his respectful manner, which stood in stark contrast to the chaotic and extractive relationships of her past. For his part, Yulim found in Beverly a surprising kinship, a woman whose life's fractures mirrored his own experiences of dislocation and rebuilding in a foreign land. The emotional landscape of their relationship was, however, not free from the tremors of cultural clashes. Yulim's traditional views on gender roles occasionally clashed with Beverly's fiercely independent streak. These moments of friction were both challenging and illuminative, forcing each to confront their preconceived notions and sometimes, unbeknownst to them, to defend or reconsider deeply held beliefs. Beverly learned to navigate Yulim's occasional paternalism with a mix of humor and assertiveness, while Yulim gradually appreciated the strength and validity of Beverly's perspectives on autonomy and equality. Yet, it was not just a story of conflict, but also one of confluence. Their evenings often ended with shared meals where the flavors of East and West mingled on their plates, a symbol of the unique blend of companionship. They shared stories of their pasts, Yulim speaking of the bustling markets and sun-drenched landscapes of Uzbekistan, Beverly recounting tales of her youthful escapades in the lush countryside and her tumultuous urban adventures. This cultural and emotional interweaving brought a depth to their relationship that was both unexpected and enriching. It was a partnership that transcended the mere refurbishing of an apartment. It was about the reconstruction of two lives, each learning from and leaning on the other amidst the backdrop of a city that watched indifferently yet somehow also expectantly. As Beverly's home neared its physical completion, their relationship, enriched by the challenges and charms of their differences, continued to evolve, hinting at new possibilities and pathways in the labyrinth of human connections. As the last brushstroke dries and the final nail is driven into the renovated walls of Beverly's apartment, a palpable sense of completion permeates the air, not just of a physical space transformed, but of lives intricately interwoven by the threads of shared experiences and mutual growth. From my vantage point, observing from the threshold of my own less tumultuous existence, the journey of Beverly and Yulim offers profound insights into the nature of human relationships and the subtle dance of proximity and personal space. Observing Beverly through the years, her evolution from a woman marked by sporadic bursts of passionate entanglements to one who engages in a more measured, culturally enriching partnership with Yulim, prompts a reflection on the power of our environments to shape us. The vicissitudes of her life, mirrored by the changing faces of her living spaces, speak to a broader narrative of adaptation and resilience. The very walls that once seemed to confine her have become canvases of expression and windows to new worlds. Each layer of paint, each piece of furniture tells a story not just of aesthetic preference, but of deep-seated personal change. The home they have created is a testament to the merging of disparate worlds, where Eastern motifs blend seamlessly with Western practicality to create a harmonious living space that transcends cultural boundaries. This transformation is not limited to the physical. It extends into the realm of personal relationships, where Beverly and Yulim, through their shared endeavor, have crafted a partnership that respects and celebrates their differences. Their relationship serves as a microcosm of the broader community outside their door, a community that is itself a mosaic of cultures, each contributing its unique hues to the urban tapestry. From a broader perspective, their story challenges the often held belief that proximity necessarily leads to conflict. Instead, their experience suggests that proximity, coupled with a genuine openness to understand and embrace difference, can lead to a rich tapestry of communal and personal relationships. This is a potent reminder in a world where distances are shrinking, yet understanding often remains elusive. As I reflect on this narrative of vicinity, it becomes evident that the true essence of community lies not in mere coexistence, but in the active engagement with those who are different from us. It is in the celebration of these differences, in the willingness to enter the complex dance of give and take, that we find the deeper connections that bind us. Thus, as Beverly and Yulim continue to navigate their shared life, the lessons gleaned from their experiences resonate beyond the confines of their renovated home. They serve as a beacon, illuminating the potential for personal and communal transformation available to us all, if only we are willing to approach our vicissitudes with the same openness and resilience. This story of proximity and personal space, of cultural clashes and harmonious resolutions, encourages us all to look beyond the surface, to delve deeper into the narratives of those around us and perhaps to find unexpected kinship in the shared spaces of our interwoven lives.